In this review, we're going to be taking a look at the Panasonic EVA1. I'm going to be talking about the image quality, the buttons and features and slow motion and electronic image stabilization, all the cool things that it comes with. And I'm also going to be comparing it to using something like the Canon C200 or some other kind of cameras in this price point. Let's start with some of the things I like about this camera. The image quality on this is really great, especially considering you're getting a 10-bit file out of just SD cards, which is great, something the Canon C200 did not deliver on. And the Vlog, which is the flattest picture profile that Panasonic offers, comes directly in this camera. You don't have to pay for the upgrade like you do on the GH5. In total, this camera has 6 picture profiles. It has Vlog, and then it has 5 after that. Here's a look at each of them and how they're a little different. Some have more contrast and saturation. Others are a little bit more flat. Compared to something like the Canon C100 Mark II, this top handle is pretty solid. It has 2 screws here, so once you screw those in, there's no wiggle at all. And then this hand grip also doesn't have a wiggle, but has a quick unlock tab here for allowing you to rotate it, which is great. But I'll talk a little bit more about the side handle later and how I'm actually not a big fan of it. The top handle also has mounting points here. They have a couple screws for mounting monitors, a couple cold shoes as well, and they have these 2 little spots here to, put a camera strap through. And then there's a microphone holder, which actually didn't hold my NTG3 from Rode. This was too big for that. And then you have your LCD screen here that mounts on this bar right here. And so you can remove it and mount it somewhere else if you wanted to, but most of the time you'll probably have it mounted right here. And then it swivels really well, can flip back, and it has some mirror and rotate buttons. And then it comes with this little kind of sunshade, if you will, that you can also take off as well. Another cool thing I like about the EVA1 is it has dual native ISOs, which means at either ISO 800 or at ISO 2500, the camera can perform really well and have less noise overall. So most cameras have a native ISO that if you take photos or you film at that ISO, you'll get the best kind of dynamic range performance and low noise, like not a bunch of the grain looking artifacts in your image. And this actually has 2. So if you're shooting in bright conditions, you would use ISO 800. And if you're shooting in low light, you would use ISO 2500. And based on my quick tests with low light, this thing is really great in it. It has a 5.7K sensor downscaled to 4K. And then if you're using that higher native ISO of 2500, you get some pretty good looking low light footage. The different slow motion options on this camera, which are at 4K, you can shoot to 60p. And then if you drop it down to 2K or HD, you can shoot at 120 frames per second or at 240 frames per second. They all look pretty good. They do crop in on the sensor as you go into those higher frame rates, but it still looks pretty good. And there's not a ton of noise and artifacts, and you don't get sound while recording those though. The rolling shutter isn't too bad. I mean, if you're whipping the camera side to side, you're gonna see it, but in slow pans and things like that, it's not that big of a deal. Most cameras nowadays, you have to deal with rolling shutter, so you're gonna see that when a car goes by or a train goes by and you're filming, but I think people are kind of used to seeing that. Not that big of a deal for me. And the last thing in the pros column for me is that the electronic image stabilization, when enabled, works pretty well. Here's a test with the 85mm from Canon, the f1.2 L series lens, which if I throw this on a normal camera without any kind of image stabilization, it's real shaky, kind of jitters, if you will. And then if you turn on electronic image stabilization, it actually crops in a little bit and it tries to stabilize the image as best as possible. So you can see here, I'm handheld trying to film a little bit of my red, and it is a little shaky still, but more usable. All right, moving on to the things I'm not a huge fan of with this camera. I actually don't really like this LCD screen. Sun hood's nice, but this thing is just not bright enough to use outside. Even if it's overcast, if it's pointed at anything bright, you can't see anything on here. So you're gonna be pointing it at yourself or something that's shaded to try to read what's here. Realistically, if you're going to be using this camera outside, and it doesn't have an EVF, so you're gonna probably have to mount a brighter monitor, something from Small HD or Atomos, something that puts out a lot of nits, probably over 1,000 or 1,500, just to be able to see what you're doing when you're filming outside. The little bit I filmed with this outside, didn't really care for using it. The text on the top and bottom of the LCD, super small, which in one way is good so that it's out of the way what you're filming, but another way it's bad. It's hard to even tell what settings you're filming with. The little tiny red light at the top when you're recording is barely visible. I don't know, this thing is just, I'm not a huge fan of it, even compared to something like the C100 Mark II's screen that I've had for about 3 years now. That screen gets brighter than this one to me. And one more thing on the LCD screen, it is touchscreen, so you can use that to navigate their quick menu or their full menus, but I found the responsiveness on the touchscreen to be not the greatest, and you also can't use it to autofocus. So like you can on a Canon C200 or even like a Canon 80D, and you can touch the screen and it'll rack focus to what you want to focus on. You can't do that with this. And you know, that is a more consumer level feature for like iPhones and entry-level Canon cameras and stuff, but it would be nice to have that in a camera that's this expensive. You also, like I said, don't have an EVF, so if you're filming outside, you can't just have it up to your eye and see what you're doing. When I'm running and gunning and doing documentary stuff outside, it's really nice to have electronic viewfinder that I can look into and see what I'm doing versus this. I'm kind of shading under the screen to try to see what it is I'm doing. The autofocus on this thing is okay. It focuses on what you want it to, yes, but it's slow. It hunts. From my tests with different Canon EF lenses and Sigma lenses, is it doesn't just like smoothly find what you're trying to focus on like the Canon C200 does. It kind of rack focuses past and in front of whatever it is you're trying to focus on, and it's not very fast, and it just, I wouldn't use it while recording something unless I didn't care if I had to cut after the thing was in focus. So I wouldn't be recording something that was really important that was happening and then push the autofocus button to trust that it would get in focus smoothly, like I've been able to with my Canon C100 Mark II, or like you can with the C200. You'd basically use the autofocus, then hit record, and it's not a smooth rack focus like on the Canon cameras. Overall, the button layout to me just doesn't really make sense to what I would think it would do. Now, they have the audio stuff here on the side, so you could maybe turn that up and down without looking, which would be nice. And they like to use dials, so this is, you know, your iris and navigating menus and things like that, as well as the dial on the side handle, which you can push in and navigate iris and menus and that sort of thing. And this switch changes what this dial does, whether it's white balance or ISO. So after a while, you could probably get used to changing your main settings like shutter speed, aperture, white balance, ISO, stuff like that if you really wanted to. But some of the other buttons I would just completely customize to things I would actually use, like thumbnail button. I don't need that. The user, you know, auto white balance right here. Like, I don't know how often I've ever used auto white balance on a cinema camera. So what I did is I changed number 6 here to autofocus, and then this little button in here to auto iris. And so you're probably going to end up customizing a lot of these things. You're probably going to leave ND filters and maybe waveform monitor or something like that. But in general, the button layout and where things are placed on the hand grip and things like that, it would take some getting used to for sure. And one more thing on the ergonomics, the side handle here has this extra lip that kind of goes over where your thumb and index finger go together. And at first I was like, oh, that's nice. It's some added weight so this doesn't slip out of your hands. But in general, I mean, I have regular size hands, and this tends to hurt after a while, actually. Like if you're hand holding this and you have a bigger lens on it, and even if you're supporting it, after a while, like that part of my hand would just get super sore. And, you know, I've used a Canon C100 for the longest time that doesn't have this little extra piece here. And my hand really never got sore using that side grip. So the ergonomics on the side handle are just a little weird to me, where the record and menu buttons are. I do like this wheel to navigate menus. Like that's pretty slick instead of having to use a joystick. But there's also a button here that's kind of like hard to press. And then to navigate the menus back and forth, you kind of have to hit this top button and then you kind of like lose your grip. And I don't know, the side grip is nice in some ways, like that it can rotate really easily, but in general, I'm just not the biggest fan of it. Another thing you're not getting with this camera like that you would get in the Canon C200 is the ability to shoot raw video at all. Now, you can output differently from this than you can the C200, and the ability to output raw feeds from this camera is easier, but like internal raw, not an option now, nor do I think via firmware it's going to become available. And on the C200, it was really nice to be able to shoot raw internal to CFast 2.0 cards. I'm sure the menus start to make sense as you use this camera more and more, and using the dial to navigate them is pretty quick if you know where you're going. But even doing something simple like switching the camera into another slow motion frame rate, for example, it takes a lot of different steps. So you have to go into system setting, and then you go into system mode. And from there, you then have to change the sensor mode. Then you have to wait a few seconds for the camera to do some stuff. Next, you have to go into the camera settings, then into frames per second, into value, and then scroll to the number of frames per second that you want. So a simple change of going from filming normally in, let's say, 24 frames per second into, oh, I want to get this shot in slow-mo really quick, gonna take you 5 to 10 seconds to do that, I would guess. I have not found a quick way to make that change or make it a customizable button to switch between those. Maybe that's possible, but just the menus in general just feel like that. To do anything takes a while. Now, I don't usually rag on a camera this much, but if you're going to be spending $7,500, it's important to know what you're getting into, what you might like or what you might not like. And too many reviews out there just talk about features and they don't really even get to use the camera sometimes. And so what I've tried to do is tell you the things that have frustrated me about this. And at the end of the day, the most important thing for a camera like this is the image quality, is what you can get out of it. But things like ergonomics and using it and comfort and some of the features, those are important too. So if you're using Panasonic cameras already, if you are on GH4s, GH5s, you have maybe a bunch of Canon EF lenses coming from Canon cameras perhaps, and you want a beautiful image, a 10-bit video file that you can manipulate well with Vlog. This is a solid camera. This thing is lightweight. It has a super good image. It has XLR in and a long-lasting battery and a lot of the things you might want from a camera like this. To me, I would probably get a C200 over this camera. They're about the same price. Going to 10-bit with this versus 8-bit on a C200, not a big deal for me personally. If I really wanted more quality visuals, I would shoot in Canon RAW Light. And just some of the quirks like the autofocus not being as good as I would hope it to be. Some of the quirks with like the side handle and the button layout. And you know, I rented this myself with my own money from LensPro to Go for a few days over this Thanksgiving break to play around with it and test it. And I'm sure if I had this for weeks or a month or something, some of the quirks would become second nature and the image quality would outweigh a lot of those things for me. But in a few days of testing, this isn't my favorite camera in this price range. If you're looking at the EVA1, you're probably looking at the Canon C200 also. Make sure to check out my review of it right here and see our latest video over here. And if you're not subscribed already to this YouTube channel, you can do so right here. I do a lot of camera reviews, teach you how to make better videos by yourself, run your video business, all the things. I've been Wojcik, and I'll see you in the next one.